Welcome to today's educational webinar, From Fair Data Principles to Indigenous Sustainable Resource Management. I'm Melissa Scanlon. I hold the Line B E-Line Endowed Chair in Water Policy at the School of Freshwater Sciences and direct the Center for Water Policy. Our center's mission is to connect the best research in water science, social science, and economics to inform policy that protects, restores, and conserves freshwater. And one way we do that is through our Water Policy Scholars Program. Each academic year, we go through a competitive process to select a scholar from one of the campuses in the universities of Wisconsin. The selected scholar is one who is researching policy questions that are at the core of one of the 10 grand challenges framed by the Freshwater Collaborative of Wisconsin. So today's webinar features our 2023-2024 Water Policy Scholar in a celebration of Earth Day and Earth Month. And our scholar is Dr. Grace Bulltail and Research Associate Dr. Parisa Sarzaeim. They are going to give a research talk followed by a Q&A, so please put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll hope to get to all of them. Before introducing today's speakers, I'm going to turn it over to Marissa Jablonski, who is the Executive Director of the Freshwater Collaborative of Wisconsin, our co-hosting organization for today's event. Marissa?
Thanks, Melissa. As Melissa said, I'm the Executive Director of the Freshwater Collaborative of Wisconsin. We are an initiative at the universities of Wisconsin, and we bring together water education and water research across all 13 UW universities. And I just want to say that this event is part of a quarterly online water symposium series that is also in partnership with the Great Lakes Higher Education Consortium and the Council of the Great Lakes Region. These events seek to encourage and advance collaborations, share science across borders, and encourage students in research and career opportunities, and also present research that's solving real-world problems. So it's a pleasure to be here and to co-host this with the Center for Water Policy. Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to hear the speakers. This is very dynamic this month. Thanks a ton.
All right, thanks for co-hosting with us. So today's webinar features, as I said, our 2023-24 Water Policy Scholar, Dr. Grace Bulltail, and Research Associate, Dr. Parisa Sarzaeim. Dr. Bulltail is an Associate Professor at the University of Wisconsin, Madison's Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. Her research covers the disciplines of water resource engineering, natural resource management, land use, water quality science, and environmental justice in Indigenous communities. She focuses her research on tribal lands where water resources are governed by sovereign tribal nations. Dr. Parisa Sarzaeim is a research associate who works with Dr. Bulltail at the University of Wisconsin, Madison's Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. Her research covers the disciplines of water resources quality and quantity assessments, climate change, artificial intelligence applications in earth sciences, geospatial analysis, and water resource management and governance in U.S. tribal lands. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to our presenters and look forward to hearing what they've been working on.
Thank you for hosting us today during this Earth Day week. And I appreciate the introduction to my research. We recently presented at the U.S. Indigenous Sovereignty Governance Summit at the University of Arizona. And we're able to share our research project. And we got a lot of good feedback and also other potential directions to take this research in. So we're appreciative for the support with this project. So it is primarily motivated by my interest in resource management, particularly water resource management. I had worked for both of my tribal affiliations for their water resource departments. And I have noticed the lack of resources to complete this work, and to many researchers who are working in similar areas, looking at tribal resources. So that was a primary motive for starting this work, and we hope that it will be able to inform continued resources to inform this work, and also to build the capacity for the tribal governments and resource managers that desperately need this information to continue to manage and protect their homelands. So I will turn it over to Parisa, and we will present the project.
Hello, everyone. My name is Parisa Sarzaeim, and I'm a postdoctoral research associate working with Dr. Grace Bulltail at the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies at UW-Madison. And I'm excited to share our research with you today, which is from FAIR data principles to Indigenous sustainable water resources management. A year ago, my research journey began with a search for technical papers and quantitative research on tribal water management. However, we found little literature on this topic, and talking to other researchers and based on our experiences, we figured out that the lack of tribal water resources including tribal water resources information and data, including hydrological, climatic, and environmental information, hindered kind of scientific exploration in this field. Then we focused on indigenous data sovereignty and governance, which support indigenous communities to control their information and data. And our research here aims to understand why tribal water, climate, environment nexus data, WC data in short, is limited, and how Earth systems researchers can overcome this barrier and challenge to benefit native communities. Our analysis revealed that indigenous data platforms do not meet FAIR principles, which are designed to make data findable and reusable by other researchers and other users in the very first place. On the other hand, the indigenous data is recommended to support CARE principles, which promote collective benefits, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics in using indigenous data. We strongly believe that integrating FAIR and CARE principles can fulfill this gap in quantitative water resources research in water resources management and advance scientific progress in this field. As you can see here, Dr. Carroll and her colleagues recommended that the very first step for applying the integrated FAIR and CARE principles is making data fair, which means findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Here is a really quick review of this research goal and objectives. So basically, the goal here is to evaluate the fairness of the WCE databases on the US tribal and reservation lands in order to explore, list, and review the available tribal WCE databases. Also to evaluate the adherence of the released databases to FAIR data principles. And finally, identify the strengths and weaknesses of these databases to improve their discoverability and usability for the benefit of the science. My research focus is about understanding the significance of indigenous WCE nexus data in Earth systems research from both indigenous and non-indigenous perspectives. From the indigenous viewpoint, tribal WCE data is essential for enhancing self-determination practices within native communities. Also, a robust data management system can help advancing Earth science research, especially the quantitative ones. Also help reinforcing indigenous communities in environmental justice and sustainability efforts. And ultimately, a validated database can empower the scientists to make informed decisions and policies to enhance indigenous communities' well-being and address the environmental disparities in these communities. On the other hand, from the non-indigenous perspective, the data can help climate change adaptation and mitigation in all communities through integrating indigenous traditional ecological, known as tech, and Western sciences in this field. Okay, based on our extensive literature review, including 20 to 30 papers, we identified 5 key water resources issues in indigenous communities, which are limited access to safe drinking water, water contamination, inadequate water infrastructure, ineffective water policies, and also the threat of anthropogenic climate change. These primary concerns and contribute to the secondary level problems such as health and social disparities, biodiversity loss, limited indigenous involvement in decision-making and policy-making, insufficient integration of tech and Western knowledge, and also some economic hardships and challenges in indigenous communities. This figure basically illustrates the relationship between these primary and secondary level problems in the field of water resources within native communities, but it's important to note that this diagram doesn't show the causal relationship. It's just trying to highlight the potential connection among the issues related to lack of data. In the next step, we try to find public indigenous WCE data available online and evaluate how much they are fair. So we conducted a systematic search using the Google search engine, and our search string included keywords like water or climate or environment in the first string, and data or database or information in the second string, and indigenous or tribal or native in the last string. In February 2024, Google returned over 2 billion results, and we evaluated the first 20 popped up entries to identify potential databases containing digital, numerical, and geospatial data on water quality and quantity, or climate and weather patterns or time series, and ecological and land use data or information for tribal and reservation lands in the US. So we filtered out the non-US databases and categorized the results into indigenous-led and non-indigenous led databases. So based on this systematic search, we identified two showcases. The first one is Native Climate, or NC in short, and the other one is Native Land Information System, or NLIS. The Native Climate, or NC, supports climate change adaptation in Native communities. The aims is to reconnect the indigenous wisdom with Western scientific data, and it's led by Desert Research Institute from University of Nevada, Reno, Tribal Extension, Montana Climate Office at the University of Montana, University of Arizona Tribal Extension, and also USDA Climate Hub. This database is funded by USDA NIFA and Native Waters on Arid Lands, and it releases multiple historical and projected climate and weather time series, including basically temperature and precipitation data. The data are released in separated 35 zip folders, and each is linked to a specific tribal college or university, which is in charge of releasing the data on that region. The next one, Native Land Information System, is supported by the Native Land Advocacy Project in Fort Collins, Colorado. The aim is to support indigenous sovereignty rights to protect their own data, land, and resources. It releases a broad range of data sets across various categories, including native demographics, agricultural systems, land use and cover, soil properties, surface and groundwater, environmental risks, and energy and mineral information. Also, it offers data and information in multiple formats like maps, plots, tables, and images, and provides the data in separated dashboards for each data categories. And based on our research, we selected four of the dashboards, which are surface waters on native lands, including mean monthly and annual flow, geospatial map of the stream gauges and the lake storage. The next one is groundwater on US native lands dashboard, including aquifer and well data, geospatial map of the aquifer and wells distribution. The third one is environmental risks for US native lands, including land cover types and changes, geospatial distribution map of the land cover, and the last one is land covers on native lands in the US, including Palmer Drought Severity Index, or PDSI, and extreme heat days, precipitation, and wildfire hazard potential. So these four data sets are the ones that we focused on in this research. Since the goal of our research is to evaluate the fairness of the NC and NLSI data as a showcase, let's review the FAIR guiding principles quickly. FAIR data principles include 4 different indicators, which are findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability, and each of them contains some components or subcomponents. The findability contains 4 different components, which are having unique and persistent identifier in the data. The metadata should be rich. The metadata should contain the identifier of the data, and the data should be indexed in a searchable resource. In accessibility, we have 2 components, which are the data should be retrievable by a standard protocol, which means the protocol should be open, free, and universally implementable, and also allows authentication or authorization if necessary. And the next one is the metadata should be accessible permanently. In interoperability, we have 3 different components, which are using formal and shared language. The vocabularies should follow the FAIR, and also the data should contain the qualified references. And the last one, reusability, contains only one component, which is the data and metadata should be richly described. It means the data or metadata should contain the data usage license. The details on origins of the data should be provided in details, and also the data should be aligned with the community standards. This table summarizes the native climate and NLSI FAIR evaluation. The blue texts are the components that are aligned with FAIR principles, but the red ones are the aspects that are required to be enhanced regarding FAIR principles. For example, in native climate, you can see that no unique or persistent identifier has been assigned for this data sets. Also, the latitude and longitude of the historical station-based data, or like the grid size resolution of the remote sensing products, are missing in this database. Again, no identifiers available in the metadata, but in the other components, this data set is doing a really good job. The language follows the FAIR vocabularies. The details about the data origins are available. The data generation, integration, validation, and curation methods are explained in the metadata. The metadata is available in PDF format. However, there are two different versions of the metadata in this database. One of them is available in the primary data file. The other one is released in a separated PDF file. And also the data are released in XLSX files. And the contact email is available for any inquiries. And also the other things are really aligned with the FAIR data principles. Let's go to the NLIS. Again, here we did not find any unique and persistent identifier. Consequently, no identifier is available in the metadata. We saw that there are not enough information about the data generation, integration, and validation or curation methods, and the latitude and longitude of the observed or measured data are missing in this data set. Also, we found that the metadata is embedded in the same page as of the primary data files, not in separated files. And also the definitions of the variables are missing. Again, in the other aspects of the FAIR data principles, this database is really doing a good job. These maps show the geospatial distribution of the native lands by native climate in the yellow color, the NLIS surface water in the dark blue, and the NLIS groundwater in the light blue. As you can see here, the NC covers 35 tribal or reservation lands. The NLIS surface water covers about 128 tribal lands, and the groundwater from NLIS covers only 40 tribal or reservation lands. If we want to focus on Wisconsin, we can see that the native climate covers 2 different tribal lands in Wisconsin. For the NLIS native lands coverage and surface waters, this database covers about 9 tribal lands in Wisconsin, and the groundwater data covers only one single tribal lands in Wisconsin. And I just want to mention that generating these maps was not that straightforward, because the latitude and longitude information, in general, the geospatial information was not available directly in the database. So we had to copy and paste the names of the tribes from the different file names or from different PDF files, and paste them to the CSV files and create the shape files, and then using them to generate maps in ArcGIS. This slide shows the temporal coverage of each of these databases. In NC, we have two different data sets. One of them is projected temperature and precipitation, which covers 1950 to 2100, and the historical temperature and precipitation covers 1995 to 2014 in the purple colors. You can see them. The NLIS surface mean monthly flow covers 1971 to 2000, and the mean annual flow covers 1889 to 2010. And the groundwater only covers one single year of 2021. Also, the NLSI land cover data covers 8 different years, as you can see in the yellow color. And the NLIS PDSI covers 1980 to 2020, and the extreme heat data covers 1979 to 2020. So as you can see here, most of these data are not updated. So based on our evaluations, we have some specific recommendations for each of NC and NLIS to improve their alignment with FAIR data principles. For NC, we recommend assigning a unique and persistent identifier and including it in the metadata, also providing the geospatial information like latitude and longitude data, and providing the list of the tribal colleges and universities names which are in charge of releasing the data, and also ensuring the consistency in the metadata files. Because as I mentioned, there are 2 different versions of the metadata files for each data set. So we need to make sure that these 2 versions are consistent. For NLIS, again, we recommend assigning a unique and persistent identifier and including it in the metadata. The next one is providing information on data generation, integration, validation, curation, which can be really helpful for users to understand how the data has been generated. Also providing the geospatial data, including latitude and longitude data, which is really important for Earth systems scientists for doing different geospatial analysis and map generating purposes. The next one is releasing metadata in separate files from the primary data files. This is a very important recommendation from FAIR guiding principles, because if the data is gone for any reason, the metadata in separated files can be still there, and the users can understand that this kind of data was available. The next one is defining the variables. It's really important to avoid any confusion about the variables that the database is releasing, and also publishing data in user-friendly formats such as CSV or XLSX, because right now the NLIS provides different formats for data like maps or tabular formats, which are not which the users are not able to customize them. So we recommend providing the data in these user-friendly formats, so the users can download them and customize them for their own research. We also did a very quick search about the tribal WCE data available with the focus of the Wisconsin. We found that Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, or GLIFIC, is one of the most important and active platforms that users can use for their own research. GLIFIC composed of 11 Ojibwe tribes in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. It provides the natural resource management expertise, conservation enforcement, legal and policy analysis, and public information services. Also, it assists its members tribes in managing and protecting and enhancing their natural resources, particularly those related to fish, wildlife, and their habitats. It collaborates to address the common natural resource management challenges in the Great Lakes region, and the aim is to ensure the long-term viability of fish and wildlife population and ecosystem within the treaty-ceded territories. It releases a broad range of different data sets, including elevation, hydrography, dams location, watershed boundaries and shapefiles, the wetlands locations, and also some information, some radar-based information about weather in the format of interactive GIS map. I guess, okay. So here is a really quick example of how the data looks like in GLIFIC. As you can see in the upper figure, there are different layers that user can turn on or off. And in the lower figure, you can see a very quick example of the data. For example, I turned on the water body locations, also the radar-based weather information. So anyway, again, we have some recommendations for improving the these database alignment with FAIR data principles. One of them, again, here is to assign unique and persistent identifier, which is really important for users to track down the publications that have already used this data for their own research. Also defining the variables to avoid any confusion. And the last one is providing the rich metadata. We could not find any metadata related to this database directly, but there are different reports that I'm sure contain very helpful information for users to understand the database that GLIFIC is releasing, but we strongly recommend to provide rich metadata in separated files with detailed information about the origins of the data and the variables and units information, which are very helpful for the users to understand the data. Also, lastly, we have some general recommendations for any kind of databases. The first one is improving documentation efficiency and consistency, especially for the metadata. The next one is ensuring data quality and consistency. We need to make sure that there isn't any consistency among the data sets. Also, building native capacity and workforce for on-site data collection and updating them, which is really important for researchers in Earth systems science. Also promoting community-based research to make the connections between the tech and Western sciences to benefit the indigenous populations. Here is a very quick information about our funding resources from Center for Water Policy and also Indigenous Environment and Science Working Group from University of Wisconsin, Madison. Some references, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Bulltail and Dr. Sarzaeim, for presenting today. My name is Raj Graywal. I'm a water policy specialist here at the Center for Water Policy, and we will now go into the Q&A part of this presentation. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll start with what is the balance for tribes who desire to maintain data sovereignty with releasing data in user-friendly formats? It's difficult to maintain confidentiality when releasing data publicly. Also related are the findable and accessible FAIR factors sometimes in conflict with the authority to control care factor?
So that's right. It is not really easy job to do that, but based on the literature, I think we need to have a balance between FAIR and CARE principles to make sure that we provide the data which are not sensitive or sacred, and the researchers can use them for the benefit of the science, and making sure that these kind of researchers are aligned with the welfare of the indigenous people. Also, we need to make sure, because different tribes, I guess, have different policies for releasing their own data. We need to respect those kind of policies. But what we are trying to say here is that some data are available there, for example, in NC or NLSI. Why don't we use these data in a better, why don't we release these data in a more user-friendly format? Because I know a lot of different projects and students who are really interested in working on indigenous water resources management, but they are not aware of the data. So here we are trying to make the already available data just a little bit more user-friendly.
I can also add to that response. I would say that tribes in general, I would say they have a very little capacity compared to, say, like the federal government, who has a lot of this data on tribal lands. They have very little capacity to collect and manage that data, and whatever reason they have for collecting it is usually probably for their own internal use. It may be about sacred sites, or say like groundwater springs. It's going to be very, very valuable data to them if they are collecting it. I would say that, kind of to think about the question more broadly, that, other actors could be better partners. So the federal government, the states who have the ability to collect this data could make the accessibility and the curation of that data more inclusive of tribes, and to consider their concerns about the data. I mean, because a lot of times the state just wants to ignore the tribal areas because they have they have less obligation to those tribal waterways, for example, whereas the federal government does have more complete jurisdiction over those areas. So I would say that partnership needs to be better in every instance that I've seen, mainly because they have the capacity to generate, gather, and curate that data.
Thank you. A related question to what you just said, Dr. Bulltail, are there any support resources available for tribal governments and communities when they are designing data collection systems and databases? So that does tie in a little bit to what you were saying, but if you want to elaborate on that.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the question. It comes down to funding. For example, these two databases that we highlighted were grant funded. So they were from the USDA, they were from a tribal college partnership. So I would say for anyone that does this type of work, it's really about the funding, the resources that are available. A lot of tribal governments, do not have the capacity internally to do these ongoing data collection. So it really is limited by the amount of resources available and funding available.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the next question. How do you recommend that tribal databases enhance interoperability of water data? The person who submitted this said they're thinking of the Internet of Water interoperability standards as an example.
So basically, the interoperability means that providing and releasing data in interoperable formats. Like, if we go back to the FAIR data principles, it means that the vocabulary should be like, the vocabulary used in the data should be fair, or the format of the files should be interoperable. For example, we usually use like shape files or like CSV files, text files in Earth systems research. So here we recommending that providing those data in these kind of formats are really helpful and time consuming for the users to work on the data.
Thank you. The next question is what can scientists and researchers do moving forward in their work to contribute to these principles in their own data?
Oh, it's really good questions. The other thing that we had a really quick look at is like in different open data repositories. So for example, Zenodo is one of those kind of data repositories that researchers can publish their own data and let the other researchers to use those data for other kind of research or projects. So one of the recommendations here is that if the policy from, for example, the tribes allows you, the researchers can publish their own data in open data repositories. For example, the Zenodo is one of the good examples that many researchers I know providing and releasing their own data there. And the other researchers, the other users can download them and use them.
Dr. Bulltail, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say that the research group from Dr. Stephanie Carroll is doing great work in advocating for data sovereignty, not just Indigenous data sovereignty, but overall, and is leading efforts to make guidelines for publishers, for authors and publishers to follow. And I've sat in on some of those workshops. So it's ongoing. But I would say that it would also extend to grant proposals and the data management there. So I definitely would look up Dr. Stephanie Carroll's research group at the University of Arizona, who are doing such great work, and also highlighting the care principles of data, which we didn't have time to, or we didn't have enough sources to analyze with this project, but hopefully in a future study we can do that as well.
Thank you. So for the next question, is there a standard or procedure in place for how data or research is published at all, like a manual for anyone that is looking to publish?
As Dr. Bulltail mentions, there are some guidelines from the indigenous viewpoints to publish the indigenous data going on in University of Arizona. So I guess that source is the best thing to look up to make sure that what kind of guidelines, what kind of formats, or what kind of information the researchers need to follow for publishing any kind of indigenous data. And also, I know that there are some guidelines from NSF for publishing the data. So this is the other resource that researchers can follow to make sure that about what kind of guidelines they can follow for their data.
Dr. Bulltail?
Yeah, as I had mentioned, I believe the AGU is partnering with Dr. Carroll's research group on a author and publishers guidelines for the care principles. I would imagine there are more for FAIR. In general, there are so many more resources for FAIR. But I think it probably starts with specific journals. So I know that the AGU journals are looking at this at building upon this issue.
All right. Another question is, should researchers wait to be asked by tribes before they research data on tribal lands, or how to approach that?
Well, I think that it's definitely encouraged for researchers to have some dialogue and build a relationship with tribal communities in I'm not sure what type of research, but any type of collection, environmental collection work that would have to be signed off by the tribal government, which you know, I would say that does take more of a partnership building and, you know, a thoughtful relationship in attempting to do that type of work. And it may be that in speaking with the tribe, they have different needs, different concerns than whatever question the researcher is thinking about. I would say that's almost always the case. So yeah, in any type of research that involves tribes, you know, the government probably has some protocols in place, and that's what I would suggest, is to attempt to see if there's an IRB, or definitely would require the consent of the community.
Thank you. The next question, for data collection and translating the data to user-friendly format, who should people contact? Community leaders / local government or local citizens?
I guess the publisher of the data is the best point of contact. As I mentioned in the presentation, there are email address for contacting and ask them, for example, I need this data, but this data doesn't have like those information that I'm really looking for. So I'm sure that they are really helpful in those kind of inquiries, and they will publish whatever they have to help their researchers to make progress with their research. And just one thing about the previous question, I would like to add, you need to note that fair data principles are the principles before publishing the data that we need to follow. And by we, I mean the data publishers. But the care data principles are the ones that all the users are required to follow after using the data. So we need to understand the difference, the time difference here. FAIR is before the publishing the data and are taken by the data publishers, and care principles are after using the data and are taken by the data users. Just wanted to add this.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, so we have a couple minutes left. So the next question is, are there any good examples of states and researchers effectively engaging with both federally recognized and non-federally recognized tribes that were able to establish a program that is not extractive and builds trust, as well as capacity to allow for tribes to steward their lands and collect and analyze their own data?
Well, I haven't been involved in any personally, but I'm sure there are examples. I'm not sure about the state involvement, but states could definitely improve upon their engagement with tribal communities. And it depends on the type of research. I mean, I can think of like the Monument project at the University of Minnesota. Those researchers have built a strong partnership with the tribes in researching wild rice manoomin and environmental impacts. But I can't think of any of I've heard of locally or at our university. It usually depends on the funding. Is this a well-funded project? Is it beneficial to the tribes? That is addressing the extractiveness of research relationships, but it definitely should be directed by and for the benefit of the tribal communities, and to be mindful about not being extractive, and building the capacity and equity of the community where the researchers are involved.
Thank you. Dr. Sarzaeim, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Not for now.
All right, sounds good. So I think we have time for one more question. Has a similar evaluation been done on non-Indigenous public databases? If so, how did the data fall out? So if either of you know about that topic.
Actually, one of the novelties of our work is that I think this is the first try to evaluate the FAIR data principles in tribal-led databases. About non-tribal, I am not sure, but I think the possibility is much higher for availability of those kind of evaluation for non-tribal databases. So yeah, if there are any, I'm not directly involved in, but for tribal-led databases, I guess this is the very first attempt for evaluation.
Thank you. Dr. Bulltail, anything else you'd like to add?
I would say that the state and federal government databases contain a lot of data about tribal lands that aren't accessible or that aren't separated out, as well as several studies which will lead to our follow-up research, where we'll be looking at the FAIR, how FAIR are oil and gas facility databases. I mean, and just are trying to find permit information, environmental information from like the EPA, for example, on tribal lands. That has been very difficult. So I would say there are many resources. The problem is that the data about tribal lands isn't findable or separated out in any useful way.
All right. Again, thank you both so much for being here today, and I will turn it over to our director, Melissa Scanlon, for closing remarks.
All right. Thank you, Drs. Bulltail and Sarzaeim. This was such an important research discussion, and we're so happy we've been able to support your work as our Center for Water Policy Scholar. Thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. If you'd like to learn more about the Center for Water Policy and the issues facing our freshwater resources, there'll be a short survey at the conclusion of this webinar, and please take a moment to fill that out and follow us on social media. And we'll see you next time.